So hello everyone, good morning. So we'll get started. So people who are new to this session, like who did not attend session 1 and session 2, let me give a brief overview on what this program is and what is RISE and who is taking care of this and all of that. So RISE is Reboot, Invest, Scale, and Empower Yourself. It's an initiative from Women Who Code Hyderabad chapter. And this is to enable women on a career break to return to work. And the whole purpose of this is to inspire women to excel in technology careers and thereby create a world where diverse women are better represented as engineers and tech leaders. So this everybody can participate in this Women Who Code, and irrespective of demographic characteristics and political affiliation, caste or preferred programming languages, everybody will have an equal opportunity here. And this Women Who Code will not tolerate harassment of members in any form. And we have our own code of conduct, and which you can read through at womenwhocode.com/code of conduct. And please make sure to register through the meetup links, because you would get Zoom link, everything in that meetup itself. All right, so with this I will hand it I will probably stop sharing, and we are ready to start the training. But before we go ahead with the training, we have a new trainer today. Last 2 sessions were taken by Nishant, but today we have a new trainer. Her name is Varsha. She's a computer engineer and she has 9 years of IT experience, and she has worked in various MNCs in India and also in US as a full stack developer. She loves coding and learning new technologies, and she also loves to train people. So thank you, Varsha, for volunteering and helping others to excel in their careers. Over to you, Varsha.
Thank you so much, Nandini, for such a wonderful introduction. And welcome all. As Nandini mentioned, that I like to train people, I like to attend trainings and learn new technologies. Coding is my passion area. So just sharing the content here on mobile first. As soon as my laptop will be up, I'll be sharing the content from laptop, and I'll try to provide some of the hands-on experience as well at the end of the session if time allows. Otherwise, I will be your trainer for the tomorrow's session as well. So there we'll be covering the hands-on part. Let me know when my screen is available to all.
Yes, we can see the screen now.
Sure, thank you. So today's topic is OOPS concept, that includes polymorphism, inheritance, encapsulation, arrays, and then we'll touch upon a little bit on the scanner. So when we talk about OOPS, it involves some basic knowledge of Java. So I'm assuming that since 2 sessions are already, like we already had 2 sessions about Java basics and the classes. So that little bit of basic knowledge will be required for this session. And when we say OOPS, this is something which stands for object-oriented programming. And OOPS consists of various different elements. These elements are abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. So we'll be going through each one of them in detail, and then we'll let you know like what is the concept behind introducing OOPS. Am I visible to everyone now? I think my laptop is up and my video is also on.
Yes.
Just pausing here for a minute.
Yes, Varsha, we can hear you.
All right. So I have left the meeting from mobile and now I'll be sharing the content from my laptop only. Let me share the screen here. Is it visible to all?
Yes.
Great. Let me show the slides 1 second. All right. So by the time the screen is up, I was talking about OOPS. So OOPS stands for Object Oriented Programming Styling. And OOPS plays a major role when we implement something because it provides us the benefit of sharing our content without sharing the details of the implementation. So when I say the implementation part, so I'll give a basic example. We all know that we have cars, we have automobiles, we know how to drive them, but we are not aware about like how it is working, the mechanism behind a car, like what are the technologies which are present, how the braking system is working, how we control the car using steering wheel. So we are not aware about the details how it is manufactured, but we are aware and we use the working of that automobile. So that is something which OOPS provides us. And then there is polymorphism, there is inheritance. When we say inheritance, so inheritance is something which is a layman English language word as well, that we inherit something, like we inherit something from our parents, we inherit something from our grandparents, from our heritage, from our lineage. Similarly, we have classes, parent class, subclass, and all those things. So we'll go through them one by one. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I am assuming that you guys are aware about the basic structure of a Java program, that is a class and an object. So if someone is not aware about it, please let me know. I'll just touch it upon a little bit. Otherwise, rest of the things will not be clear. Okay. I'll take silence as a yes that you guys are aware. So moving on. OOPS. So we'll first touch upon the one of the OOPS concept, that is why. Why do we need OOPS? So as I mentioned, it provides us various benefits. It provides our language to be reused, to be scalable, to we can extend it. And when I say reusable extend, I mean that okay, today I have implemented something as a developer, but maybe later upon the business requirements change or the scenario changes, the technology needs to be evolved. We need to make it more secure, we need to make it more usable, more user friendly. So in all those cases, we want our language always to be extensible, to include new features going by the technology and the industry trends. So that is where OOPS come in picture. So here I'll read upon, it is something which provides us implementation of various real world entities to ensure security of code by binding together the data and functions. So I'll again take the same example of car, the data and functions. As a user, as an end user, I'm only concerned about how it is working. But think about from the perspective of a manufacturer. Today they provided some automatic braking system, that is ABS. Maybe tomorrow they wanted to enhance that ABS system and provide some more add-ons over it. So if the implementation or the programming, the system, the mechanism which is controlling that ABS is not extensible, it is not something that you can modify, it is only one time use, then there's no purpose of using any coding language, because then you'll have to start from scratch, you'll again have to implement. And if you are using OOPS, in that case, you can build upon something. Say, for example, if you are already having block 1 and you want to implement block 2, instead of starting from 0, you'll start from block 1. You already have a base, you already have a fundamental, and then you only extend it. So that is the entire concept of using various encapsulation, polymorphism, or inheritance. Are we clear so far? You want me to take a pause, or because this is the basic of OOPS? All right. So why OOPS? What are the advantages that it offers? So there are several benefits of implementing OOPS concept in Java, and some of them are reusability. As I mentioned, you'll not start from scratch. You will have already established a foundation. You will just build upon that. Then there is code maintenance. So this is a very important area, because as if you think about from a company perspective, from a team perspective, maybe my client's requirement today is to okay, deliver me a security system so that I can implement a website and I use my login credential using username, password, and I'll log into that website. This is the requirement at day one. I implemented it and I delivered it to client. And then later on, they started using it. And for some of the users, the username and password is not working, or it works sometimes, it is giving error at some places. So that comes as part of code maintenance. Your job is not only to deliver something, but your job is also to ensure that it keeps on working. It nothing breaks. You'll have to maintain that code. So in order to maintain a code, several OOP concepts comes really handy. Because if think about something, you have written 100 lines of code, and if the developer resigns and some other developer comes and he starts to look into that code, he will not be able to understand those 100 lines of code if it is not explainable. There is no oops concept, there is no diversion of functionality, everything is written in a single class. So in that order, you'll have to write a code which is maintainable, so that someone else can also come, understand it, and extend it. Then there is third point of data redundancy. So data redundancy, for example, I'll take one case that you have two classes, class A and class B. In class A, you have written a logic to use your login password and ID and log in into the system of the website. And in class B, you'll have to show to the user that, okay, if I'm logging into somewhere, it will show me a message, welcome Varsha. So I'll have to pick up the user who has logged in and then display a message, welcome Varsha. So think about something, if I'll have to again write everything, validate user using username and password, then fetch the username and display it on screen. So instead of that, what I can do, I have already class A, which is doing this functionality for me. It is authenticating the user using username and password. So why to write it again? Use it. Use the same code and implement it just to display the message. So that is something where reusability and data redundancy part comes into picture. Then the fourth point is security. So as I mentioned, it like separates the functionality and the implementation part. As an end user, I'm only concerned about the functionality. I don't want to know what goes behind the logic, what is the code written. I just want to see, okay, this is serving my purpose. It is fulfilling the need that I have. And as a developer, I have to make sure that, okay, it is serving the purpose, but how it is serving the purpose. The brakes, the anti-braking system is working in a car, but is it working efficiently? Is there a way that I can make it more secure? Is there a way that I can make it more easy for the end user? So I have to do all that part. So we'll have to keep these two things separately, the functionality part and the implementation part. And here also comes into picture the security. Say I'll take an example of the website again. As a shopping website, I logged into the system, I selected something into my cart, and I did the transaction. I am not concerned how that security system is working, how they authenticated my credit card details, what was the validation going on in behind. I am concerned that, okay, I wanted to buy this product and I'm able to buy this product. That is my only requirement. But as a website developer, my job will to make sure that, okay, if the user is entering his or her credit card details, it is not being misused. Someone else is not able to go into my system, fetch those details and do fraud transactions. So that's where security parts comes in, where I am concerned about as a developer, but not as a user. So this is something that I am trying to explain, how to differentiate between different parts and where oops comes into picture. Then there is easy troubleshooting. So easy troubleshooting is basically when you have implemented something and you delivered it to client, this shopping cart website, and they mentioned that, okay, sometimes when what is happening, you are adding something into cart, but when I'm trying to purchase it, it is showing that the cart is empty. So in that case, it will come back to me as a developer. I'll have to troubleshoot it. Troubleshoot as in I have to debug it. And I'll have to find out in my code, like where exactly it is breaking. The item is why it is being removed from cart. So again, oops will help us in doing easy troubleshooting. Then problem solving, it is one and the same thing as troubleshooting, that whenever there's a problem, we'll have to narrow it down. We'll have to find that piece of code and then we'll have to solve. And then the another benefit is flexibility and design benefits. So as I mentioned, today my requirement is only just to log in and display hello Varsha. But maybe tomorrow client wants to add on something, like taking an example of WhatsApp. Earlier, WhatsApp was just a simple messaging tool where people used to send each other messages. Then it provided an enhancement. Okay, you can send videos and photos. Now it is providing an enhancement that you can make payments as well using WhatsApp, using your UPI IDs and all. So these are all enhancement. Earlier a product is developed for a specific purpose, but later on we can definitely want to enhance it, extend it, depending upon the requirements of the client. So these are all the advantages that OOPS offers us. How? Then we'll see in the upcoming slides. Any questions so far? All right. Moving on. The first concept that I want to talk about OOPS is inheritance. So as I mentioned, inheritance is something that we inherit. We inherit something from our parents. So whenever we have a newborn in our family, we say, okay, he inherited the eyes color from the parent, one side of the parent, maybe the color of skin, maybe the hair, everything that we say that, okay, he has inherited it something. Apart from the physical attributes, there is certain financial aspects also that they have inherited. Inherited is that something which gets passed on from one generation to another or from one parent to a child. So when we say inheritance, we'll be using two words very frequently. That is parent class and second is child class or subclass. Parent class can also be known as a superclass. Child class can also be known as a subclass. One and the same thing. So when I say inheritance, what is inheritance in Java? So inheritance in Java is a mechanism which one object acquires all the properties and behaviors of a parent object. So when I say here object is something which represents attributes of a class. So as I mentioned, I think you guys are aware about the concept of class. So I'm taking class A. Class A is my parent class and class B is my child class. So in class A, that is in the parent class, I will be having certain functionality, certain methods that it is supposed to do. In that, or to make it more simple, let's take an example of animal. So class animal and class tiger. So animal is the parent class and tiger is the child class. So every animal has 4 legs. They have 2 eyes and then they have teeth to hunt upon. And then a lion is also, or a tiger is also supposed to inherit all these qualities. A tiger is also having 4 legs. A tiger is also having 2 eyes. So all these things will implement in our parent class. That is in class animal. I have already written a piece of code that, okay, it contains 4 legs and it contains teeth. Now in my tiger class, I want to enhance it or I want to customize it. When I say customize, even an elephant can be an animal, but elephants don't hunt. They usually feed upon trees or plants. But when I talk about tiger hunt. They need teeth for the purpose of hunting. They need speed for the purpose of chasing their prey. So this is a customized attribute of tiger, which is not required in elephant. So I'll have class animal, I'll have class tiger, and I'll have class elephant. So what I'll do, I'll have some basic features in class animal because it is a parent class anyways, all the animals are going to inherit it. And whatever specific is there for my tiger class or for my elephant class, I'll write it in at those classes. So I'll show an example as well. First, again, theoretically see what is inheritance. So the idea behind inheritance in Java is that you can create new classes that are built upon existing classes. So here existing classes are class animal and new classes will be our class tiger and class elephant. When you inherit from an existing class, you can reuse methods and fields of the parent class. So as I mentioned, I'll be having certain basic features of an animal in my parent class that every other subclass is going to inherit, 4 legs and teeth. Moreover, you can add new methods and fields in your current class also. So again, as we discussed, apart from inheriting the basic features of 4 legs, I want to have some customized features of my classes. So tiger is yellow, elephant is gray. I cannot put that in my parent class because if I put yellow color in my parent class, elephant is also going to be yellow, but that is not a realistic scenario. In order to make it actually the realistic implementation, I'll put the color attribute in my child class and not in my parent class. So my parent class, class animal, will only be having one attribute, that is attribute of having legs, 4 legs. The color attribute will be present specifically or separately in each child class because it is different for each class. We cannot generalize it. So only generic features we want to put in the parent class. So when you talk about inheritance, it also represents a is-a relationship. So for example, again taking the same example of animal and tiger and elephant class, tiger is an animal. So it's a is-a relationship. Elephant is an animal. Again, it's a is-a relationship. But we cannot say animal is a tiger. This sentence does not make any sense. So is-a relationship goes from subclass to superclass. That is, it's a parent-child relationship, not vice versa. All tigers are animals, but all animals are not tigers. Just understand it like this way. Then again, we understand that, okay, this is inheritance, but why? Why do we want to use? What is the actual benefit that it offers? So one of the major benefits that I mentioned is it provides you a basic foundation, a basic structure over which you want to build upon your rest of the code. So I'll already have a parent class animal. Now I want to make it my own specific classes, but I don't have to write that code every single time. I'll just simply use my parent class. So this is the benefit: reusability, redundancy it reduces, and security it provides. It provides a generic structure. These are the benefits. So for method overriding, also known as runtime polymorphism for code reusability. So when we say method overriding and polymorphism, just put a pin over it for now. We'll go into it on more detail in subsequent slides. Then more frequent terms which are used in term when we talk about inheritance in Java is class, subclass, child class, superclass, parent class, and reusability. Class, subclass, child class concepts we already understood. Superclass, parent class we already discussed using the animal example. And reusability also I have explained that reusability is something that I don't have to write it every time. This is a very simple example that I am taking, that okay, every animal is having 4 legs. Think about a real-time scenario. Hundreds of lines of codes will have been present in your parent class and you don't have to write them every single time. You'll just simply need to use your parent class. So this makes your code more efficient, more performance savvy, it runs more fast. So all these are benefits of using inheritance. Now this is a real-time coding syntax that I wanted to share with you guys. So the syntax of Java inheritance: the class, subclass name, extend, superclass name. So when I'm taking subclass name, replace it using tiger, and when I'm talking superclass name, replace it using animal. So basically class tiger extends animal. You don't have to use class keyword every time, you just simply use their name, that is animal or tiger. Class keyword you'll have to write when you're defining a class. So here at line number 1, I am defining class. So that is why I am using keyword class, then tiger, then extends animal. I'll again don't have to use before animal. Then whatever methods and fields you want to have in this child class. And then again, the second example, extends. Extends is also one of the keywords that I wanted to explain. So whenever I'm talking about inheritance or okay, it uses parent class, how it is using, you'll have to specify in code that, okay, this is the child class, this is the parent class, and this is being done using this extends keywords. So the class name which appears after extends is your parent class, and the class name which appears before extends is your child class. As simple as that. Also, you can have only one parent class. You cannot have more than one classes. This is something also that we'll pick up on when we'll go upon abstraction and interfaces. For now, just understand a child class can have only one parent class, but a parent can be child of multiple classes. So for example, your parents can have more than one children, but you can have only one set of parents. Simple. You can have siblings, they can share same parent, but you can have only one parent. So similarly here, a child class can have only one parent class, but a parent class can be parent of many child classes. Similarly. Again, taking a more realistic example of salary. So my class A is my parent class. It is having a object an attribute of salary that is of type float. So when we say integer, float, double, these are various data types. So if you are familiar with any programming language, or even if you are not, just understand it like this. Like whenever we talk about any attributes or properties, we have to specify their data types. Say for example, salary is a number. You get salary in digits. You don't get salary in characters. My name is a character. I spell it using VARSHA. It's alphabets. Whereas my salary will be in certain digits. So here, its salary is a number. That is why I'll have to provide it using a float or integer data type. If I would have provided one more attribute, that is name. Name is made up of alphabets or characters. Then I'll have to provide another data type, that is string. So there are different data types in Java that maybe you'll learn upon once you'll do some more research or more studying on Java. For now, understand that salary is of type number. And for numbers, we have integers and floats and doubles. So this is float. Then class B is my child class and class A is my parent class. So as I explained earlier, extends is the keyword here. So every class after extends is my parent class. Every class before extends is my child class. So B becomes the child class, A becomes the parent class. Again, bonus. Bonus is a digit. It's a number. So for number, we have integers. So when we say integers and float, the difference between integers and float is that integer is a whole number, whereas a float can contain decimals as well. Say for 10.12 is a float number, whereas 10 is an integer. So here I am having one more integer variable, that is 10,000, but I don't want to define salary again. Salary is already present in my parent class. So I'll just simply inherit it. As you can see, the another method, the basic method of any Java class is public static void main. If you want to run a Java program, you have to have a main method. So this is my starting point of application. This is my starting point of file. And when I say public static void main, this is the syntax of it. It always expects this string argument as one of the variables or the parameters. And then what I'm doing, I'm just simply creating a object, that is programmer object. Programmer, here you can see that A is equivalent to programmer. What I'm trying to specify is A is my programming class, my super class. And what I did, I created an object of this class. So instead, how will I access my, okay, again, one more example. Am I audible?
Yes, Varsha, you are.
Okay. So when I take this example of inheritance again with parents, so we inherited something from our parents, right? So say, for example, bank balance. I inherited the bank balance of my parents. But how will I use that bank balance unless until I have something to use or access it? I need to know their locker account number, or I need to have that key to the lock, or I need to have that online banking ID. So consider objects as those online banking ID. Okay, I have the property, but in order to access it, I need something. So my object is that key. I inherited salary. I inherited salary from my parent class. But in order to access that salary, I need to have an object of my parent class. So that is what we are creating using this new programmer. New is the keyword. So everything which appears here in blue on my screen, these are keywords. Class is
Is Varsha stuck for all of you too?
No, I couldn't hear
or
her.
the input file, meaning that in my parent I had a salary property, and in my child class I have a bonus property. My requirement is to simply display this information on screen. So I inherited salary. In order to access it, I'll have to have an object. So that object is created using new programmer, new keyword. I created an object, and then I'm displaying it using p.salary, p.bonus. So this is a very small example. Again, in realistic scenario, in real world coding, you'll be having thousands of lines of code that you'll save using this concept. Here, simply, I don't have to write salary again because it is already present for me in my parent class. I have written only bonus and then I'm displaying both. So this is the example and usage of inheritance. If you have any questions so far, if you're not understanding superclass, subclass, because this is the most basic example. Okay, I think it is clear then. Moving on. Types of inheritance in Java. So we'll not go into much detail of this topic because if I'll try to cover every type of inheritance, it itself will be a single topic. Since we have some limitations over time, I'll just simply explaining this to you, and I'll request you all that the learning doesn't stop here. In order to understand the actual concepts and basics, whatever any trainer is teaching you that day, please go and try to do some self-study. So I'll be providing you the references, like whatever sites or websites I have referred to present this PPT. You can refer those sites, or you can refer to any book or any site of your interest. Just try to read more about it, because we'll not be able to cover everything in a 2-hour span. So in types of inheritance in Java, there can be multiple types. First is single inheritance. The example that we have seen: parent class, child class, simple. The another is multi-level inheritance. Another example of multi-level inheritance is like I have my parents, so I am the child, my parents are my parent class, then I have my grandparents. So my grandparents will be parent class of my parent. So it's from child to parent to grandparent. That is a multi-level inheritance. Then the third type of inheritance is hierarchical inheritance. That is, again, I explained that you can have sibling. Like I have a sister, and my sister and I, we share the same parent. So two classes can have the same parent. That is an example of hierarchical inheritance. Any questions? Okay. Then one more example is of multiple inheritance. Like we can, I know that I have mentioned it earlier that we cannot have multiple parents. And actually it cannot be done using the extends keyword. But there is certain exceptions. There are certain scenarios where this can be done in Java. We'll be touching upon that in our slide. But for now, just understand that there is a way that you can have two parents. Not using extends, but using another concept. Then there can be hybrid. Hybrid is a mixture of everything. Like we understood the hierarchical inheritance, then we understood multiple inheritance, combine both of them, and you get your hybrid inheritance. That a class is having two different parent classes using different concept, and two siblings are having the same set of parents. This is your hybrid inheritance. That was all about inheritance. I just brushed upon the topic. I have touched upon the basic thing, the advantage. But in order to understand it more, how complex it can get, we took a very simple example of salary, created an object, displayed that salary. But apart from that property of salary, you can have various methods. When I say methods or functions, these two are interchangeable statements. So say for example, again taking back of example of that salary program, my requirement was to display salary on screen. Now after a year, my salary increased, and now I wanted to do the calculation as well. That okay, my X was the amount of my salary, and then there was 10% of increment. Now what will be my new salary? So instead of calculating it and then displaying it on screen by myself manually, the next year also my salary will increase by 10% or maybe 12% or 15%. So I'll write a generic piece of code. I'll write a method. I'll write that method that will do this calculation for me. And that method can also be present in a class. So apart from property salary, I can also have a method to calculate my salary. And then this can go further. Then you can simply add on functionalities and use that as your parent class. So that was the basic concept about inheritance. Moving on to our another OOPS concept, that is polymorphism. So what is polymorphism? Polymorphism in Java is a concept by which we can perform a single action in different ways. Single action in different ways is again taking one real-time example. Say you want to go to a mall, a shopping mall. So there can be multiple ways to reach that shopping mall. You can opt for route 1, route 2, route 3. But the sense is which is the most efficient route. And at run time, like say for example, one route is 12 kilometer, one route is 15 kilometer, one is 20 kilometers. If you'll ask anyone why this, that okay, one route is 12, 15 and 20, they'll simply say, okay, opt for the shorter one, go for the 12 kilometer route. But this is not the real time scenario, right? You'll have to see whether that 12-kilometer road is in good condition or not. Maybe it is not having road in that better condition. The 15-kilometer will provide you a better version, and then you can reach your destination much faster. Then they'll say, okay, then opt for the 15-kilometer road. But again, it is not a real time scenario. Say suppose you wanted to go to that shopping mall, you thought, okay, 15-kilometer road is in a good condition, it will make, like I'll reach my destination in 30 minutes. But say suppose that day there's heavy traffic on that 15-kilometer road. So in that case, you'll opt for 20-kilometer road, because despite of being a longer route, it is making you reach your destination much faster because of the real-time scenarios. So this is actually how we write code. This is how actually we implement functionality for our clients. You'll have to see it real time. You'll have to decide at real time which one is better. So this is where polymorphism comes into picture, that you cannot make sure, okay, every time execute this method. No, depending upon your requirement, depending upon your inputs, you'll have to decide which method to execute. So moving on, taking that example of road, I hope the concept is clear, like what is the real-time scenarios and all. Then there is two types of polymorphism, method overloading and method overriding. When I say method overloading, say I have one method function for A and I have one method function B. Both of them are doing the same purpose for me, calculating my salary. But for my case, I don't have any bonus component. I just have a simple fixed salary that, okay, Varsha will get this much amount at the end of the month. But my colleague is also having a variable concept, a bonus concept. So they, for their salary, it will be, the calculation will be little bit different, that, okay, this is your fixed part. Apart from this, you will be getting this bonus depending upon these calculation. So both of them are calculating the takeaway salary, like what we'll get at the end of the month. But the way they are calculating is different. So in that case, what we'll do, in my case, I will be having a simple method which takes my salary as input, provides me end of the day salary by doing some calculation. For my colleague, they'll be having a method which takes two inputs. One is salary, second input will be bonus. And then they'll do calculation on them and provide the takeaway salary. So this is method overloading. Both of them are doing the same purpose, but differently depending upon the number of inputs. Then there is another concept of method overriding. So when I say method overriding, say in my parent class, I have provided a method to calculate salary, this. Then my parent class was written months ago. Like last year in 2020, my organization used to calculate like this. Now a new policy came into picture and they want to calculate salary in a different way. But this method is being used by multiple classes. So I cannot, like, say there are different sections in an organization, right? Finance, HR. So the method salary calculation changed only for finance, not for HR. So what will I do? If I'll change the original method of calculating salary, it will impact both finance and HR. But I don't want HR to be impacted. I want only finance to be impacted. So instead of modifying the existing method, the parent method of organization, I'll simply write my own method for my finance department. That, okay, for rest of the organization, whatever used to happen, it will continue to happen in that way. But specifically for finance department, now salary will be calculated in a different way, not like other people. So here method overriding will come into picture. In my finance subclass, I am writing a method version of my own of salary calculation. So what will happen? It inherited the parent method. Now I have written my own method. So in that case, my new method will override the old implementation. Another real-time example is that Okay, you inherited your hair color from your parents, but you don't like that. You want to change it. So you cannot go and say to your parents, right, that change your hair color, then it will change for me automatically. No, you'll go to a salon and you'll get your hair color. So you are doing it for yourself, for your customized need, not for anyone else. Your siblings, your parents will continue to have that hair color. Only you will be having a new color. So understand it like this. That is overriding. And also it cannot happen like if your parents are having black color and you want to color your hair blue. So definitely your blue color will override your black color. You're applying something new. So you'll override, you'll provide a new implementation, you'll discard the old one. Okay. Now there will be different scenarios how to invoke which implementation, because there will be certain needs where you want to use still the old. You don't want to color entire color here blue. Maybe you want to have only one streak of blue color, you want to have rest of them as black. All these are different scenarios. For now, you'll have to understand the concept and then further extend into that concept. Like, okay, in certain situation, I can do this, certain situation, I can do that. Simply, this is method overloading and method overriding. Runtime polymorphism or dynamic method dispatch is again some technical terms. It is only which I have explained it to you. These are the technical terms for that layman language. It's a process to call an overridden method to resolve at runtime rather than compile time. So runtime, compile time means compile time is something you have written a code, then you compiled it using a compiler. So in Java, when you understood the Java basics, we need certain things: Java development toolkit, Java runtime environment, Java compilers. So compiler is something which will assess whatever you have written in code, whether the syntax is correct or not, whether there is a semicolon missing, a comma missing, double quotes missing. These are syntax errors that will be detected as compile time. When I say runtime, runtime is another that example of the roads, 15 kilometer, 12 kilometer, 20 kilometer. You cannot decide at runtime. You cannot decide at your home, okay, I'm going to take this 12-kilometer road. You'll go out on road, you'll see the traffic on Google Maps, and then you'll decide, okay, this route is having heavy traffic, I'll have to opt for this. This is your runtime decision making. So again, the same thing, just that technical terms are present. In this process, an overridden method is called through the reference variable of a superclass. When we say the reference variable, understand for now, it's an object of parent class. The determination of the method to be called is based on the object being referred to by the reference variable. Say so, for example, parent class, child class. Parent class, I have inherited something in my child class, the salary method, of course. Then I wanted to override that salary method. I implemented my own customized version, and then I want to execute it. So if I want to execute my version of customized method, then I'll use object of my child class, because child class is something which is having this new implementation. But if I want to execute the parent class version, I'll have to use the object of my parent class. So taking an example of that salary object again, say in finance department, you implemented a new salary method, calculation and all, but one employee is about to be retired at the end of the year. He opted that, okay, I don't want this new mechanism. I'm going to retire in few months. Please let me continue with the older version. So for that particular employee, you'll have to again use the older version of salary calculation, because he is not eligible or he is requesting. So in that case, there's still a possibility that although you have overridden the parent class method, but in some cases you can still call it. Still call it how? Using the parent class reference. And if you want to call the newer version of your child class, use the child class object. So as simple as that, whatever version you want to call, just use that reference. So this is the gist of using polymorphism in Java. Moving ahead, any questions about this slide, overriding, overloading, anything? Okay. So this is an example of Java runtime polymorphism, a simple example of shape. As I mentioned, all tigers are animals, but not all animals are tiger. Similarly, all rectangles are a shape. Shape is a generic term, but you cannot say that every shape is rectangle. Shape can be square, rectangle, circle. So here what we have done, we have a parent class, that is class shape. This class is having one generic method, draw, and this method is simply printing on screen drawing. Then I have a child class rectangle, and using the extends keyword, I am inheriting the properties of my parent class, shape class. And I again provided an implementation of method draw. And here it is not displaying drawing, it is displaying drawing rectangle.
Hi, Varsha. One second. Sorry to interrupt. Can you show the slide in the bigger screen? Like, it's there in the left-hand side, right? Whatever screen you are explaining.
This
Whatever
one you want
slide you are
to
explaining. No,
yeah.
no. I'm seeing the previous screens. Yeah. It's
Is it
sixth
visible
slide,
now?
right? But no, I think the older screen is in the bigger view.
Okay, I think it is because of the network slowness, because for me, I'm on the current slide, but maybe for the display purpose, it is still stuck on the previous one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So right now we see the syntax of Java inheritance.
Yes, yes, that is what I'm displaying.
Yeah, I see that.
Maybe it is a network latency at your end or my end, I'm
No,
not
no. I
sure.
could see that syntax of Java inheritance only. But
This,
you're explaining some. Yeah.
are you able to see class shape?
No, no. Class, subclass name, extends. It's inheritance screen. It's there.
Oh, okay. I think then I'm on a different screen. For me.
Nandini is also saying that, right?
Yeah, I see that subclass name extends superclass name.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. No,
Maybe.
I'm on a different screen. It can be a network latency at my end then.
Okay.
I'm stopping and I'm trying to share again. So this was the slide that I was trying to explain. So my parent class is my shape class, and rectangle and circle and triangle are my child class. So my parent class, I'm simply having one generic method, which is displaying drawing on screen. But in my child class, I want to customize it. I want to display drawing rectangle, drawing circle, or drawing triangle, depending upon the class. So here what I have done method overriding. Because my parent class was already having a method named draw. If I want to use the same method name, I have to override it. So that is what I have done. I have overridden it in each of the child classes. Then I come into my main class, that is test polymorphism 2. Here I am having the main method, public static void main. This is the generic syntax of any Java program. Then I created a reference of my parent class, not object, reference. An object is created when I use the keyword new. So I have not used the new keyword at line number 15. I simply created a reference, shape S. That is, it is of type parent, of type shape. Then this reference, since it's a parent reference, it can have any of the child object. So here, what I'm doing at line number 16, in that reference variable S, I'm creating and assigning an object of class rectangle using keyword new. So at line number 16, S is of type rectangle because I use new rectangle. And at line number 17, when I'm using s.draw, it will call draw method from rectangle class. Because at this point of time, it is having an object of rectangle, not of anyone else. Not even of parent. It is having a reference of new rectangle, that is rectangle object. So if I'll call s.draw, it is going to call method draw defined at line number 5 for class rectangle. And it will display on screen drawing rectangle. Not drawing circle, not drawing triangle, drawing rectangle. And at line number 18, what I did, I reassigned this variable. Earlier till line number 17, it was of type rectangle. Now at line number 18, I reassigned it to type object of circle using keyword new. So new circle, now at line number 18, it is of type circle. At line number 19, when I am trying to call s.draw, it will call draw method of circle class, because at line number 18, I reassigned it to circle. It is no longer a rectangle object. It is now a circle object. Similarly, I have done it for line number 20 for triangle, and line number 21 will call draw method of triangle. So the important point to understand here is that shape S is a reference variable. Till line number 15, I have not instantiated it. I have not initialized it. I just declared it. So there are two terms, declaration and initialization or instantiation. At line number 15, I declared it. At line number 16, I instantiated it using rectangle object using new keyword. Unless new is used, you have not initialized your object. You have just created a reference. See, for example, I'll take again this example of parent and child relationship. So unless until a child is born, you can decide name of that child, but the child is not present physically. So at line number 15, I have decided name of that child that, okay, it is going to be called S, but that child is not present. It will be present unless I use the keyword new. So at line number 16, I use the keyword new, then the child is present. Then you can say, okay, S is the name of this child. Till line number 15, only name is there, no child. But at line number 16, name you have already decided, but child is also present now. Now, taking another real-time example, say suppose before my birth, my parents decided that, okay, we are going to name our daughter Varsha. They decided that. And then at line number 16, like they assigned me that name. Okay, you are going to be called Varsha from now on. And then later on, a sibling happened and I have a younger sister. My parents decided, okay, we are going to change your name from Varsha to Pooja. And now your younger sibling is going to be called Varsha. So this can be done. This is what we have done. At line number 15, we decided our name S. At line number 16, 18, and 20, we reassigned that name to different objects. And whatever current object is being referenced to that name, that is being invoked. That method will be called. So this is method overriding. Any doubts for this? Okay. Moving on to the next slide. This was runtime polymorphism. Depending upon which object is assigned, we'll be calling that method. Now compile time or polymorphism is method overloading. So two terms, method overriding, method overloading. Method overriding is runtime polymorphism. Method overloading is compile time polymorphism. So these are interchangeable terms. One and another, you will, like whenever you will try to do some self-study, don't get confused. Just understand like this. So method overloading says that you can have more than one function with the same name in one class having a different prototype. So different prototype, again, I will take the same example of salary calculation. Say suppose in class organization, I have two methods, salary calculation, salary calculation. First salary calculation method is taking only salary component, doing the calculation and providing me the salary. Second salary calculation method is taking salary along with the bonus part, doing calculation and providing me the salary. So here you are not having different classes. You are having the same class, but different prototypes of that method, or different class and different prototypes of that method. Say for example, in my previous example, here you can see line number 2 void draw. It's the exact same method at line number 5. Exact same. Nothing is changed. We have the same 0 parameters. We have the same return type. We have the same name. Exact same method. That is why it is overriding. If instead of line number 2, I have void draw, and at line number 5, I'll have int draw, or I'll have string draw, or I'll have void draw, and then I'll provide one argument, one parameter. Then it is not overriding, that it is overloading. Let me try to show it to you. Just bear with that. My laptop is a little bit slow today. Otherwise, I would have shown it to you on Eclipse, but we'll do that tomorrow. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say, if I'll write void draw and I'll again write void draw, this is exact same methods. This will do method overriding. But instead of this, if I'll write, then no longer it is the same method. Not the exact same method. It is having a different parameter, that is int salary. It is accepting int. It is accepting a salary component. Whereas the first method was not having any parameter. In that case, it is not overriding, it is overloading. I'm using the same name. It is maybe doing the same calculation or not. But here the argument is different. So what will happen if I'll have shape S? When I'm calling this method, it will call the first method because it is not having any parameter. And this will decide, okay, it is having a parameter. This one definitely doesn't match because it is not having any. So I'll have to call this one, which accepts an integer parameter. So this is the difference. When you'll call, it will decide. And again, an example, suppose you don't have this, but you're trying to call, then it will give you an error. Because you're trying to call a method which accepts an integer, but your method definition is something which is not accepting anything. So all these are different examples that you'll have to explore on your own when you'll be doing more research on this concept. The 2-hour session that we'll be taking up on each topic will help you understand the basics so that you don't feel alienated whenever you're trying to read that on your own. So this will help you and provide you a foundation, a starting point. Coming back to our slides, again, we use anything because it provides you a benefit. So why do we need to use overloading? What is the advantage of using it? So if a class has a multiple methods having same name but different in parameters, it is known as overloading. When we say parameter, we'll again have to go back to the example which I have explained. It is this. Here salary is my parameter. Okay. So same name, different parameters. It increases the readability of the program. So you don't have to like write, say suppose you have a method whose sole purpose is to calculate salary, and you named it calculate salary. That is a very logical name because just by seeing the name, you understand the function it is going to do. It is going to calculate the salary for you. But now you'll have to pass on one parameter to it, and you will say calculate salary 1. Then you'll have to pass on 2 parameters. You'll say calculate salary 2. So this is not a meaningful name. It is not a very good readable program because calculate salary 1, 2, how you are differentiating it, right? It is not providing you any clearance. What is 1 doing? What is 2 doing? So instead of that, you simply have calculate salary method, and depending upon different parameters, it will execute its function. And any user will understand just by seeing the name. So it improves readability. There are different ways to overload the method. First is by changing the number of parameters or argument. The example that we have seen. This is an example of the first type. We change the number of parameters or arguments. For now, understand that parameters and arguments are one and the same thing. They are interchangeable. For now, understand this. So this is for now the cases. Another way of overloading a method is changing the data type. So this method return was void return type. Its return type is integer. So that is why it is different. In same name, different return type, same name, different arguments. 2 ways of overloading. Moving on, this is an example of a more realistic case, whatever I have explained so far. So we have a class adder. And in that class, we have two variables, two methods. One is static int add, accepting two types of parameters and then returning the sum of it. Basically, a plus b, it is returned. Then we use the same name, but instead of two parameters, it accepts three parameters and it returns the sum of all of them. So again, the same, it is doing the same purpose of addition, but with two numbers or with three numbers. So instead of this, if I would have written add 1 and add 2, the purpose is not clear what add 1 is doing, what add 2 is doing. It is not a good readable program. Instead of that, I use the same name and I provided different parameters. Then I have my main class test overloading. There I have the main method, the basic syntax of Java, public static void main. And then I'm trying to print. I'm trying to print the result of first method and I'm trying to print the result of second method by changing the number of arguments. So the first line at line number 7 will print 11 plus 11, that is 22. And then the third line number 8 will print 33, depending upon which method is getting invoked. So any doubts or is it clear? Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's again the same type of example. Just the difference is instead of having both as the type integer, I'm now having a method where I change the number of parameters, where I have not changed the number of parameters, but I've changed the data type. As I explained here, it is of type void, it is of type int. So similarly, I can write it like this. So this is also a method overloading because I have changed the type from integer to double. Whenever we say integer to double, for now understand integer is a whole number, double or float is something which can have decimal digits as well. So here what we are doing is exact same thing, exact same invocation, just that while calling the second type of method that is of type double, instead of passing whole integers, I am passing decimal numbers 12.3, 12.6. So again, taking the example, your salary is not always a whole number, right? You'll not be getting, okay, maybe I'm getting 10 lakhs rupees. So no, 10 lakh, sometimes it is 10 lakh 20,240. So, or maybe after 240 also you have certain pesas. So all those things at real time calculation, you do not have whole numbers, you'll have decimal numbers. So for that, we'll be using float and double. So whenever you understand or try to learn anything, try to understand it from a real-time scenario as an end user. That okay, and not any single website will be there which will only display welcome Varsha. That website is going to serve some purpose. What that purpose will be, how you will achieve it by using your coding. This is how you'll have to approach any language while learning. Moving on. So far we have understood two concepts, that is inheritance and polymorphism. Third is encapsulation. Third concept of OOPS is encapsulation. What is encapsulation? Encapsulation in Java is a process of wrapping code and data together into a single unit. Code and data wrapping in a single unit. That is encapsulating it. Try to understand it just like a capsule. Whenever you have that capsule, it contains certain medicines or some formula inside it. So that capsule is something which represents encapsulation. It is holding something. It is holding the medicine together. Then we can create a fully encapsulated class in Java by making all the data members of the class private. Now we can use setter and getter methods to get set and get the data in it. The Java main class is the example of a fully encapsulated class. So when we say private, so is there anyone who don't understand the concept of public, private in Java? Like we have certain keywords. Okay, I'm assuming that you guys understand it. Just for the sake of refreshing, we have certain, like we have variables in our Java, this shape. So as soon as I'm not providing any keyword before it, it will take the default protection level. But if I'll provide it public Public means it is accessible to all. It will be visible to all the classes. And if I'll write private, that means this variable S will not be accessible outside any child class. Like it is defined for me privately. My parents have their locker key with them securely and privately, unless until they want to share it with me. So this is something which happens here. My parents, they are having all their documents or something safely locked somewhere. Now they have the key. They have a private key with them. Now I am their child. They want to share it with me. Then only they'll share. So this is the concept of private. It will not be accessible to anyone outside our family. It will only be present within the parent class and child class. So this is how we implement encapsulation using the private keyword. Now again, the same and basic question, whenever you learn anything new, why? Why do we want to learn it? What is the advantage of using encapsulation? So first and foremost advantage that we have discussed is security, the privacy. I don't want anyone to have access to my locker key. I only want that to be accessed within my family. This is the security. By providing only a setter or getter method, you can make the class read only or write only. In other words, you can skip the getter or setter methods. So basically, I want to know the other person that, okay, we are having 10 lakhs rupees. We just want to share this information. Why? Like, what is the differentiation between the 10 lakh? How many 2000 rupee note? How many 500 rupee note? We don't want to discuss. We don't want to let them know where is that 10 lakh rupees present. We only want to share this much information with you. So this is how encapsulation is done. I shared the public information, but when you want to know the details, no, that is not accessible. That can only be accessible using certain methods, which will be present only for my family. So these are getter and setter methods. Like, okay, obviously I wanted to share this much information with the outside world, but within family, we wanted to know, right? Like this 10 lakh rupees is coming from which source? Okay, if Varsha is bringing in this much amount of money, this much amount of money is coming from here. So all this will be known using methods, getter and setter methods. It provides you the control over the data. So whenever you implement anything, the basic thing that a programmer requires, or for the sake of security, is the control. When you have that shopping website, you need to have that control to authenticate user. Only authorized users can log into your application and do the transactions. Not everyone can, like I cannot go and provide any username and password and log in. I cannot lose that control. So control needs to be present over the data, whatever you want to display, whatever you want to hide, all that sort of control. Suppose you want to set the value of ID, which should be greater than 100 only. So you can write the logic inside the setter method. You can write the logic not to store the negative numbers in the setter methods. So again, taking a real-time example, whenever you try to create your username and password, sometimes there is certain restrictions that password needs to be this much long. It needs to contain a special character. It needs to have some numeric value, or this username is already taken. So all this is something which you are controlling. You're not allowing anyone to set any username. Like my username is Varsha Yadav. I cannot allow anyone else to have the same username because this will create discrepancy. How the system will validate of which Varsha Yadav to authenticate. Varsha Yadav is having one password, another Varsha Yadav is having another password. So you cannot allow the same username. So this is the kind of control and security that you need to implement in your system. And this is all done using encapsulation, OOPS concept. So the examples that I am explaining to you, these are very single tone examples. These are very basic examples to make you understand the concept. But whenever we write code, whenever we implement a language, this all comes together into picture. Not inheritance cannot serve the entire purpose. You cannot implement everything just by using inheritance. You cannot fulfill your purpose just by using encapsulation. You'll have to use them together. Sometimes inheritance will come into picture, sometimes polymorphism, sometimes encapsulation. So this is how the entire coding process works. And this control, data hiding, everything is hand to hand. Then it is a way to achieve data hiding in Java, because other class will not be able to access the data to the private data members. See again, taking the example of that shopping cart. Say for example, okay, I had the control that this username is already taken. You cannot retake it. You'll have to find a different username. At the time of creation of user or the sign up process, I implemented this. But not just at the sign up process. This needs to be taken care of throughout. See, it cannot be the case, okay, when I'm trying to log in or when I'm trying to create an account, you gave me an error, this username is already taken, I took a different username. But later on, as a user or as a fraudster, I was able to manipulate your system and change my username back to something else. Because your authentication layer was only present at the sign up, it is not present anywhere else. That cannot be the case. The data encapsulation, the security or the control needs to be present at every single layer, at every single page, not just at the login page. While doing that transaction, while adding something into shopping cart, while buying that item, while tracking that item. Say for instance, you ordered something, okay, your purpose is done, you have successfully, securely made a transaction with the same person. Varsha Yadav was trying to order something and Varsha Yadav made the payment, everything was done successfully. But then later on, my item has not arrived on time. I want to track that item. At that point, it cannot happen, right? That Varsha Yadav ordered it, but Nandini is able to track it. No, the only authorized person should be able to track it. So you'll have to have that data control and security layer at every point. You cannot let others manipulate your data. So that is where this setter and getter methods will come into picture, because the private methods or the private variables can only be accessed by that class's method, not by anyone else. We'll also take an example of this. Then another example of encapsulation is that it is easy to test. When we say easy to test is as a developer, whenever I'm writing a piece of code, I'm writing 10 lines and I know that, okay, this 10 line is going to work. I tested it, I delivered. But then in those 10 lines, I added 5 more lines. So I'll have to test those 5 more lines, but I cannot test them separately. I'll have to test all 15 of them together. So all 15 of them should be easy to test. And where you cannot deliver anything unless until you are able to test it. If I have implemented a logic that, okay, username and password has to be unique and password has to be this much long, special characters and all those things, I implemented everything and it worked for the first time. But maybe when the second time I'm trying to use the same username, it is not giving me an error. Or maybe it's a second time if I'm trying to reset my password. At the time of password creation, all the security layer was present. It asked me to use special character, it asked me to use the length character and all those things. Okay, I implemented it, but then later point of time, I am trying to be extra smart and I'm trying to reset my password and I'm trying to set it to something which is not complying to your security policies. So this should not be the case. These are different use cases. First use case is password creation. Second use case is password reset. So the same logic which was present at password creation should be present at password reset. So here what we need to do, we need to reuse the code. So there comes the concept of reusability, there comes the concept of inheritance, and then we'll have to hide that logic from the someone who's trying to reset, that they cannot know what we are implementing in the background. There comes the concept of encapsulation. And at the runtime, we have to decide whether it's a password creation process, it's a password reset process. So this is being decided at runtime. So polymorphism will come into picture. So you can understand, right? Just in a single functionality of password creation and password resetting, we are using all of them. Inheritance, polymorphism, encapsulation, everything is being used. So this is just one topic of Java. Similarly, when you understand other topics of Java, you'll see that how the entire language comes together to create an end-to-end functionality. So it is easy to test. The standard IDs are providing the facility to generate the getters and setters. So it's easy and fast to create an encapsulated class in Java. When we say IDE, it means integrated development environment. Integrated development environment is something which, for example, Eclipse, Sublime Text, these are tools. Certain tools are available. Some of them are paid like Visual Studio. Some of them are free like Eclipse. So when you want to learn Java or you want to understand any programming language, you have to have that integrated development environment. There you will write your code, you will compile it and you will run it. So we'll see execution of it in our tomorrow's session, when we'll be understanding more of the rest of the Java topics, like how an IDE works, how you can download it. All that information I'll share with you. It is a free open source tool. It is available freely, or you can buy a licensed version as well. So depending upon your requirement. And what happens, as soon as the facility of using a calculator over a manual calculation is that it fasters your transactions. It enables you to do faster calculations. So similarly is the case with IDE. What I can do, I can write here also class A and all those things, right? But it is like I have to type everything. It is a time consuming process. Whereas if I'll be using an IDE, that is an Eclipse IDE which is present, what will happen if I'll simply write class A, it will automatically generate this certain basic syntax. It will create for me as soon as I'm writing the getter and setter that I'm talking about. Let me show an example. So say suppose there is a variable int salary.
Varsha, are you typing something on Eclipse? Because we just see your PPT. We don't see Eclipse screen.
Okay. Again, maybe the network latency part. I'm trying to type something on my notepad. Is the notepad not visible?
No, we don't see the notepad.
Oh, I think because I shared only the PPT part, let me stop sharing and I'll share the entire screen. Now
Okay,
is it
sure.
visible?
Yes, can.
Okay. So what I was trying to say is that, say suppose I'm having a class A, and I have one component or one variable that is salary, and I declared it private. By private, it means it will only be accessible within class A or any child class. Okay. Now say suppose if I want to access this salary, what will happen? What an IDE, an integrated development environment, will provide you? They'll create some getters and setters automatically for you. Getters and setters as in like you can set it. What will happen? I'll create. One second. So in my child class, what I'll do, I'll create a variable. Of type class A, and I'll call this method set salary, and I'll provide the salary value. And if I want to display it on screen, I'll again call the getter method and I'll display it on screen. So these are the getter and setter methods. For every private object, private variable, private salary, private components, you cannot access it outside unless until you have the object of that class, and using that object of class, you will call the methods. So example of security here is that no one else can manipulate my salary. No one else, unless until they are authorized to, because it's a private component. So they'll be having access to this salary variable only via methods. They cannot simply do this. No, you'll have to use your setters and getters. And another benefit of using IDE is like I am typing it on a notepad. Instead of it, if I would be using an IDE that we will be using in tomorrow's session, is that it will provide you certain syntax suggestions. Say if semicolon will be missing here, or if I'm just simply writing like this, so it will give me an error at this line that one of the brackets are not properly closed. So instead of providing you suggestions or auto completing your code, it also provides you syntactical errors at the then and there. You don't have to actually compile and run and see. It will provide you those errors. So I have installed Eclipse in my machine. But because of the time crunch, we'll not be using it today, and we'll be going through the how to run Eclipse and simple example when we'll be understanding other concepts tomorrow. All right. Moving on, taking an example of encapsulation. So there's a statement at line number 1, package. Package is a new keyword now. So far we have learned about class keyword, extends keyword, void, integer, public, private, public static void, new, package. So package is something that can hold different classes together. Say for example, taking the example of our family, a family is a package. So whenever we say that, okay, Yadav family, we'll be saying entire family members, my parents, my grandparents, myself, my sister, all those members will be in a package family. So package is a collection of something, different classes to be precise. So in package A, we can have a public class student. In that public class student, we are having one private string name. Then we are having two methods, getter method and setter method. Set name, get name, these are public. So understand here, methods are public, variables are not. So name, no one else can go and modify my name. Only the family members who are having access, they can modify my name. They can say, okay, from now on, we are not going to call you Varsha, we'll have a nickname for you. But only those authorized person, because my name is a private thing and it is accessible using public methods only to authorized persons. So here I created public methods, void name, void set name, and string get name. Now the difference between the setter and getter here is that both of them are public. Both of them can be accessed via child class, but set name is a void type and get name is a string type. Why? Because get name is returning me a string name, but set name is not returning me anything. Void means it will not return anything. It will simply do something, perform and sit. It is not going to return anything. So similarly here set name is and string name. And so here you can see that the package name is common for both the classes, for class student as well as for class test. And then we have this public static void main method, which is common for all the Java programs. It is the one which we uses to execute any Java program. So here what we are doing, we are creating an object student s equals to new student at line number 6. So we are creating an object of class student, and using that object, we are calling setter method set name, and we are setting the name of the variable, which was a private variable. No one else can modify it, but here we are setting it to Vijay. And at line number 10, we are calling the getter method using the object again, and we are displaying it on screen. So on screen at line number 10, you will be seeing on executing this program, Vijay. So the benefit of this program is that we created a simple generic class name, setter method and getter method. Now, whenever you want to change it to Vijay, to Varsha, to Pooja, to Rahul, you don't have to write it again and again. You just simply need to set name and get name. Simple. Only 2 lines will be required. Rest of the things are already done. So this is reusability. So consider of this example, an organization, we have all the new employees joining, right? So they created a basic framework that, okay, whenever a new employee will join, this will happen. So they don't have to repeat the entire process again. They already have a set process. They just need to follow that thing. Or another example is that any website, this shopping cart website, just take it for an example. They don't exist, like every time a new user is being created, they have certain things, fields, set name, like provide your username, provide your password, your date of birth, and maybe your age or something. And then simply you provide your email ID, OTP and all, verification is done and you sign up. So for every single user, they have this set process, but they have only written that code which is running behind the scene once. They'll not be like creating a class every time a new user is logging into their website. No, the class is there only once, on one class is present, and that class is fulfilling the purpose whether Varsha is trying to sign up, whether Nandini is trying to sign up, or whether Pooja is trying to sign up. It is going to execute it depending upon the user. So it's a dynamic piece of code. It executes depending upon your requirement. So am I clear here, like the purpose of having a generic class and executing it dynamically? Okay. So this was the concept of encapsulation. Like, why do we encapsulate? How do we encapsulate using private, public, getter, setter? What is the benefit of it? Taking an example. So this was the third concept of OOPS. Moving ahead, we have fourth concept, abstraction. So far we have understood inheritance, polymorphism, encapsulation. Now the fourth component, that is abstraction. So when we say abstraction, I'll again come back to the example which I took in the beginning, is that whenever you are driving a car, you are aware about how to drive a car, how it is running, how the wheels are moving forward, when you are applying to the brake, how it is stopping the car, when you are applying the acceleration, how it is speeding up. All those things you are not aware. As a layman language or as an end user, you are simply aware that, okay, you are running a car. So that is abstraction. Like only displaying functionality which is relevant to user, not showing the entire behind the scene mechanism. Now I'm again trying to log in back using laptop. Just give me a moment.
Recording in progress.
All right. So we were talking about abstraction. And as I was explaining, abstraction is something displaying only the required information to the user and hiding everything else. So reading through it, abstraction is a feature of OOPS. The feature allows us to hide the implementation detail from the user and shows only the functionality of the programming to the user. Because the user is not interested to know the implementation, it is also safe from the security point of view. See, again, taking the same example of car, as an end user, I am only interested to drive a car. I simply don't want to understand what is ABS, what is the torque level, what is the force that we are applying, which lubrication oil we are using, or what are the components, what is the quality of tire. I'm not interested. I am simply interested that, okay, this is my car and I can drive it. So this is a user-friendly concept, plus it's a security point of view concept as well, that you are not making your implementation details visible to others. If it is visible to others, maybe they can hamper it, maybe they can manipulate it. So this is a security point of view as well. Now let's understand the abstraction with the help of a real world example. The best example, as I mentioned, is a car. How the car is moving, how internal components are working, we are not at all bothered. But we know how to drive a car. It means it is not necessary to know how the car is working, but it is important to drive a car. The same is an abstraction. So the same example, our end purpose is being fulfilled. As a user, whenever I'm logging into a shopping website, I am being authenticated, I am able to buy my stuff, and I'm happy with that. I simply don't want to know which algorithm you have used and behind the scenes, which encapsulation you have implemented, how public key, private key is working, how you are posting my data over the network. I'm only interested that I'm doing the thing that I want to do and my data is secure. My credit card details that I'm entering is not being misused and my purpose is fulfilled. That is the only concern that I have. And this is what they show it to us. They provide me security, plus they provide me the layer which I want to see. Any questions for this? Okay. Then abstraction. As we saw, polymorphism, inheritance, or encapsulation. In order to like implement inheritance, we have extends keyword. In order to implement encapsulation, we have public private keywords. In order to implement polymorphism, we have method overriding, method overloading. So certain things are present to actually implement it. Learning a concept is theoretically is different, and then writing it in your code, implementing it is different. So abstraction, how can we implement it? So for that, we have this keyword abstract. So whenever we use keyword abstract, understand that we are trying to create an abstraction layer. So basically there is something which is happening in this piece of code. So whenever you write public abstract class and then the class name, it means you are writing an abstract class. And by an abstract class, what do we mean? This class is only going to declare functionality, maybe not implement it. Sometimes what it can do both. It can either declare or implement, or declare and implement. So for example, this class, here a method is there which is also abstract. So say suppose I am taking the example of my family again. So maybe my parents are having they are having maybe a inherited property, but they have never used it, and they are simply passing it from one generation to another. And what I want to do, I want to utilize that property. There's a piece of land, it is being passed from generation to generation, but nobody actually utilized it. I want to utilize it. I want to build a house over that piece of land. So the passing on is abstraction. It got passed from generation to generation, and building a house is implementation. That I want to implement it. I want to build something over it. So till that point it was getting passed on, it was okay to be declared as abstract, because everyone declared, okay, this is something which will pass on, we'll not use it. Pass on as in abstract. But as soon as I want to use it, I'll have to remove this keyword abstract. I'll have to provide actual implementation. So taking an example again, 1 second, I had that notepad. Yes. So basically, say suppose if I had this method void abstract set name, I simply declared it. I have not done any implementation. It's an empty method. It is not doing anything. Then in my child class, again, I am doing this. Not doing anything, getting passed on. Then there is this third class, which is extending my child class. But here I want to print something in this method. So I cannot use abstract because I am actually providing an implementation for this. So as soon as I'm not doing anything here, for this method, I am just passing it from generation to generation. It is okay to use abstract. Abstract is a way of specifying that, okay, this needs to be implemented maybe sometime, not now, but maybe someday. Someday someone will want to implement it. Someday someone will want to build a house on this piece of land. For now, we are just passing it over. So abstract means that it is a way of indicating it. But as soon as you want to implement, as soon as you want to build a house over it, then you'll have to drop this abstract keyword. Okay, understood so far? What is the purpose of showing abstract? So abstract is a way of letting you know that this is something which needs to be implemented, but as at this point, it is not yet defined. And understanding an abstract class is that abstract class can either have a non-abstract method, that is a generic method, and it can have an abstract method. For example, here, this class, child class, again, this will be an abstract class because it is having an abstract method, but it can also have a non-abstract method. And this method is doing something. It's perfectly okay to have a non-abstract method and then have an abstract method. But as long as there is only one, not even if a single method is abstract, then the class needs to be abstract. This means that not all the methods are defined. At least one is there which is not defined. And the class who is extended it, unless it also declares itself as abstract, it needs to implement it. Say for example, if I remove this method definition from here, it is also not implementing it, then this class also needs to declare that, okay, I am also not implementing it, please pass on. So this is the purpose of using keyword abstract. Reading it here, it is used to define generic types of behavior at the top of an OOPS class hierarchy, and it uses its subclass to provide implementation details of the abstract class. Something that we have seen in an example, that as soon as we have an abstract method or a variable, it needs to be declared using abstract, or you have to define it. Simple. Either pass on that piece of land or build a house over it. You cannot sell it. So when we say abstraction, there are two concepts which come into picture. So one is abstract class, something that we have seen just now, that it can either have an abstract method as well as a non-abstract method. Another concept is interface. So interface is a very generic term. You must have heard this term UI, user interface. User interface, so in interface is something which is present to interact, which is present as a layer. So interface is again something which provides you a layer. In Java, all the interfaces are abstract and they are by default public. So basically an interface is an abstract class, but an abstract class can have a non-abstract method as well, whereas an interface cannot have a non-abstract method. All the methods in interface are just declarations. You cannot define them. You just need to declare it. So any class who's going to implement, there's another keyword, implement. Another class, any class who is going to implement an interface, they need to define it or they need to be abstract. Say for example, there are two keywords that we need to learn. One is abstract, another is implements. So whenever we talk about abstract, when we talk about classes can be abstract and they can be used using extends keyword. We extend a class. Inheritance, we use extends keyword, right? Similarly, there is interface inheritance. So whenever we say interface, it's again a keyword of Java. If all the interfaces methods are abstract by default, and we use an keyword implements. Also, please understand that Java is a case sensitive language. So if I write I small in implements or if I write I capital in implements, it makes a difference. Implements. Say class A extends class B. Okay. But a class A can implement an interface I. Also, class A can extends B. Okay, you don't have to write another class keyword here. That was just for the understanding purpose. Class B, and it can implement A or interface I. So now you understand the concept of multiple hierarchy that we saw in the beginning, hybrid hierarchy. When I said that, okay, you cannot have two parents, but in case of an exception. So here is the exception part. A child cannot have two parents, but they can implement multiple inheritance using interface. B is my parent, maybe I is my godfather, but I am going to inherit property of both of them. So we can have only one set of parent using extend keyword, but we can implement multiple interfaces. So for you, the takeaway for today's topic is extends keyword, implements keyword. So whenever you are trying to dig more into this topic, just these two keywords will help you: abstract, extends, implements. And these three keywords will summarize the entire abstraction for you, at least the basic part. So this is what we have shown here using an example. Features of interface, we can achieve total abstraction. How total abstraction? Because it can only contain abstract methods, not at all any implementation or definition. We can use multiple interfaces in a class that leads to multiple inheritance. As I have displayed just now in an example, you can use extends keyword along with implements. So you can have multiple inheritance. It also helps to achieve loose coupling. When we say coupled, tight couple code, loose couple code, it means the dependency between the code. Say for example, a tightly coupled code is not preferable because when I want to modify my name, I want to change my name from Varsha to Pooja, it should not impact any other functionality. If it is impacting any other functionality, that means my code is interdependent. If I change one piece of line, it is going to impact other 100 piece of line. That is not a very good code practice. And how interface helps us? Interface is only providing us the declaration. Definition is in our control, so it provides a loosely coupled code. Syntax is public interface. An interface is always public. All the methods in interface are always public void. To use an interface in a class, Java provides a keyword called implements. All right. So this summarizes the four important concepts of our OOPS. That is object-oriented programming. It is polymorphism, encapsulation, inheritance, and abstraction. Four important concepts. If you'll understand these concepts, you'll understand the object-oriented of Java, as well as if you want to learn any other programming language which works upon object-oriented concepts, these are the basics. Moving on, since we don't have much time, I wanted to quickly touch upon arrays. So arrays is basically a Java data type where you can have a collection of similar type of objects. Say for example, a class is an array of students. All are of type student, all are of similar functionality. They are homogeneous, of the same nature. So a Java array is a collection of similar elements. What are the advantages of using an array? It provides code optimization. It provides you flexibility of multiple data. So for example, if you are having an integer variable can only have one type, that is one value. Maybe it can be 10, or you can change it to 20 or 30. Whereas an array will provide you an option to have 10 as well as 20 as well as 30. How? So this is the syntax of declaring an array. You can have single dimensional array or you can have multi-dimensional array. So these, Nandini, I think these slides will be shared with the participants, right?
Yes, we are going to share.
Okay. So as soon as, don't try to understand or go much deep into the syntax, because these slides are anyways going to be shared with you. You can refer to the slides later on. Just try to understand the concept for now. So as I mentioned, an array, either it can be single dimensional or multi-dimensional. Example of single dimensional array is displayed here. That integer a, 33, 3, 4, and 5. So it is containing four values basically, and it can be of any integer values. 33 is an integer, 3, 4, 5 is also an integer. If I declare it instead of integer, it is a float. That means I can have the decimal values as well. You can have a string of arrays like hello, Varsha, Yadav, all these can be different elements. But you cannot have 133, one hello, and one Yadav. No, they are all need to be of the same type, either integer or float or string. Again, this is a syntax that you can refer later on with the slides, that I created a new array, that size I have provided 5. That syntax of creating a new array is this: int a, new int 5 at line number 3. And then I am changing the values. I am providing the values that, okay, 0th index is 10. Important point about array is that it starts with 0. It starts with 0 index. So if you say that, okay, I am going to have 5 elements, that means 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So first element will be at 0th position, last element will be at 4th position. You can specify the length of an array. There are certain predefined methods of an array. If you want to understand more, it is altogether a different topic. There are so many methods of array. So just to understand the basic or the most used one is the length. So whenever you want to display all the elements of an array, you want to know the size. You can understand it using the length keyword. It is one of the properties of array. Then we have multi-dimensional array. So similarly, if you want to have one layer of 1, 2, 3, 4, then another layer of 4, 5, 6, 7. So that can be done. And similarly, they again start with 0th index. So if you want to have the first row, first column value, that you can use using the 0, 0 or 0, 1, 0, 2, so on. This is an example of multi-dimensional array where I have a multi-dimensional array of integers, where we can see that we have, okay, one row is of 1, 2, 3, second row is of 2, 4, 5, and fourth row is 4, 4, 5. There I want to print the values. So as I mentioned that we can have for loops and all those. If you are aware about any programming language, you will be aware about for loop, while loop and all. If not, then these will be covered in upcoming sessions, and maybe then you can revisit in this side and then you will understand more. All right, the last topic for today is the Java scanner. Again, Java scanner is a class in Java, a predefined class, which provides you certain built-in functionality in Java programming language. And it provides certain functionalities of printing or something, or displaying something, writing into a file, reading from a file. So when we say writing in a file or reading from a file, try to understand it in the form of digital format, not in actual pen and paper. So say suppose if you have a file, I have a file varsha.txt in my laptop, in my computer somewhere, and I want to write something into that file. Okay, logs. The most common example is logs. Whenever you log into a shopping cart website or somewhere, they maintain a log. Like, okay, Varsha, or you have already seen it in any website, right? And then whenever you try to do a shopping, you see at the top, hello Varsha, last login was today 10 a.m. So they maintain a log of it. That, okay, Varsha logged in twice today, once at 10 a.m., once at 3 p.m. So they want to log this in a physical format somewhere. So what they'll do, they'll create a log.txt file in their system. They provide a path of that file. And as soon as any user is logging into it, they'll provide that these logs. How these logs are useful, that later on for any debugging or any troubleshooting or any transactions. Suppose if I ordered 10 at 10 a.m. and then I call the customer care and I ask them that, okay, I ordered a pen today. They'll go and see my history, that whatever Varsha has ordered today at 10 a.m. and they'll provide me these details that, okay, your last order was this and this. So all this comes into picture when you try to write something and then you try to read something. So Java scanner, understand it like this. Its basic purpose is to write into a file or read from a file using different classes. So Java scanner is a parent class in itself, and it has certain child classes which provides you an ability to read and write efficiently. One of the syntax example here is that system.out.print. We have seen this throughout the slides that we are trying to print something on screen. So how we are trying to print something? This out is the keyword here. So out is something reading and in is something writing. So what I'm doing in this example is that I'm simply writing a simple Java example, public static void main, and I created an object. How I'm creating an object? We saw that new is the keyword to create an object. So scanner is a predefined class in Java, and I'm creating an object of it using new, and I'm asking to provide my name on screen. So as soon as this line will execute at line number 9, a message will appear on screen, enter your name. I am typing my name, VARSHA. So this line at line number 6 using in is the variable or the object name, will read it character by character, VARSHA, and then it will store in a variable name, and in the line number 7 it is going to display. So what will the entire functionality or behind the scene will not be appearing to the user. What as a user I'll see, it will ask me for my name, enter your name, then something will happen in the background, and then after a few seconds I'll see name is Varsha. So all this is happening behind the scenes, but how it is happening? Using in key object, out keyword, all these things using scanner class. So you'll understand more about it as soon as you'll dig deep, you'll understand more scanner concept. The primary understanding is that scanner is something to read and write, just as simple as that. These are again the same example in a different format, that how you can not just write string Varsha, you can also have certain Boolean values. Boolean is 0, 1, true, false, or you can have integer in your name, all these things. And at the end, you can close. So scanner object is opened as soon as you use the new scanner and using the in object in dot next line at line number 6. But after your reading is done, your writing is done, you need to close that resource. So that can be done using in dot close. These are some of the references that I have used to create this slide. So there are a lot of options available when you try to understand Java. Java T-Point is something that I have referred for creating this slide, for taking some of the examples. They have certain topics. You can go there and try to understand them. And then I have referred to this blog also, where the OOPS concepts in Java is present, and it was present in very easy to read language. So for any beginner, I would say that you can refer to these sites and go and study. And just to summarize it, whatever we have studied so far, the primary purpose of this session is to understand the OOPS concept, that is object-oriented programming concept, that we have tried to cover as much in detail in 2 hours. The 4 concepts are primarily inheritance, polymorphism, encapsulation, and abstraction. These are the 4 building blocks of OOPS. Then we have seen an example of array. So array, I would suggest go deep into data types. Array is just one of the data types, but we have integer, float, double, string. So try to read about them. And then we slightly touched upon one of the defined classes of Java, that is scanner. Scanner is a predefined class. It's a keyword. You cannot use it for something else. It provides certain methods like next int, next line. Basic purpose of scanner class is to read and write. Read into something which is appearing on screen, you are entering, reading that, logging it into a file or somewhere else. So that is the gist about scanner class. I would say pay more attention or try to revise the concepts of OOPS. That is the building block of Java, and for the any upcoming session that you are going to attend. From now on, everyone will simply refer public, static, private, encapsulation, extends, implements. So you need to be aware about these keywords. At least these keywords try to grasp as soon as possible. So I think we are on top of the hour, already past 6 minutes. So Nandini, are we good to close the session for today?
Yes, Varsha. If you're done with
Alright.
everything, I have this slides. I'm gonna share it with everyone.
Sure. Thank you so much. That will be great. And thank you everyone for being a patient audience. And let me go through all the slides that I have prepared. I'll be your trainer for tomorrow's session as well. And then there I'll try to show some of the IDE examples while going through the topic. So thank you very much for today.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Varsha, Nandini.
Have a good day. Yep. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.